Welcome back to this edition of Japan's top business interviews. It's my great pleasure today to have an old friend of mine, Paul Hardisty, who's the ex-CEO, recently became the ex-CEO of Adidas Japan. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
Thank you very much. So, Paul, for those who may not know your background, just give us a little bit of an idea of where you've worked, which countries, what you've been doing, and how long you've been in Japan, that type of thing.
Yeah, sure. I started my career in Melbourne. My background is business finance, becoming a CPA. So I was the last job that I was doing before I left Australia was the CFO of a group of fashion brands across Australia and New Zealand. And after close to 7 years, I just really wanted to work overseas. So every resume, every letter that I was sending off was a written form at that stage, back in 1998. And every recruiter that I sent a mail to, the message was, I want to work overseas. And I kept coming back with, there's a job in Sydney. I said, well, that's not really overseas. All right? There's a job in Western Australia. Not really what I'm thinking about. And finally I had a call, and that was Adidas. I went to an interview in Sydney. I was successful. I got that role as the head of Indonesia. And but right then in 1998, that's when the riots all broke out in Jakarta. So they put that job on hold. I stayed where I was then for another 8 months or so. I then left my fashion company, took 3 months off, and in that 3 months, just by chance, Adidas called me back and said, am I still interested? And that's where it started. That was back in something like April, May of 1999.
And what was the fashion brand you were working for in Australia for all those years?
It was the main brand was Davenport. The gentleman who owned the company was Clyde Davenport, and we were pretty famous in boxer shorts and Disney character boxer shorts, ties, etc. But we also then took on the distribution and licensing for Calvin Klein, CK, Warnaco, Carhartt jeans, etc. And we went from there. It was a great experience. It was something. It was my third job, I think, by then. But I had this urge to head overseas. Didn't know where, didn't care, but I just wanted to work overseas.
Why?
And,
why was that?
I don't know why, to be honest. I just my father, he's a traveller, and he loves to get up and holiday and just explore. That's the only thing I can think of. And I just wanted to get. I could always come back to Australia or go back to Australia, and then I got this job in Indonesia, and then I ended up Indonesia for 5 years, running Indonesia, Adidas. They asked me to go to India to fix up a lot of corruption that was going on. I stayed there for 6 months, fixed that. They wanted me to stay. I decided I needed a less of a developing country, more of a bigger market. I then ended up in South Korea, of where I stayed for 6 years, I think just over 6 years. But my dream country to head to was always Japan. And
why is that?
It's a large market. It was a sophisticated market in the Adidas group. It's a beautiful country. I'd been here several times, and and every time I had that conversation with my boss in Germany, he would say, "What's next?" And I would say, "Japan." And eventually one day he called me and he asked me would I relocate to Japan with my family and kick it off, and that's how it started. And that's been 10 years now in Japan, and I felt that 10 years was long enough. 20 plus years in Adidas was long enough, and I was ready for a change, and that was me.
So if you think about 5 years in Indonesia, and you've had, was it 6 you said, I think, in Korea, right? So 11 years, and then you turn up in Japan. So when you get to Japan, what did you find was different or challenging about leading in Japan compared to Indonesia, compared to Australia, compared to South Korea?
Yeah. I wanted to, I think, sort of be clear. I think that the challenges, there's a different bucket of challenges in every country. They're just different challenges. Some of them are common, some of them maybe not. But I wouldn't say that in Japan there's any more or any less challenges than anywhere else I've worked, even from Australia. I'm sure if I went back to Australia now, there'd be as many frustrations as I have today. But try to focus on the good stuff that that keeps you going. For me, the biggest challenge about coming to Japan and working in Japan was the scale of the market. I mean, Japan's a big player. I mean, it's top 3 economies in the world. Back then, I think it might have been number 2. China taking that in about 2010-11. For me, the scale of Japan, Adidas Japan, was something I had to get my head around. I was running a Korean operation of 300 million plus euro. I came to Japan 2.5 times bigger, and I had to ask myself, how am I going to manage a business of this scale with this many people and still have the same impact, still be with my finger on the pulse and understand what's going on? That was the kind of thing that I had to get through in the beginning. I think language also was a challenge coming to Japan.
How many people? You said 300 in Korea.
No, 300 million. That was 300 million.
How many people in Korea? How many people in Japan?
You know, I can't remember how many I had in Korea, but nowhere near what I had.
How many in Japan?
In Japan, we have now over, say, 550 in the office. We have another 1,800 staff in store on our own retail chains, and we actually 3PL our warehouse. So there's, you could imagine if I had my own warehouse, that would have been quite a few people also. That was the scale size was what I had to get my head around. And I also went from Indonesia, which was a 15 million euro, to 150 when I got to Korea. Same dilemma. So again, not unique just to coming to Japan. But then Japan also was a focus country, and you've got the board's focus on me. We sneeze, the world catches a cold, as they say. So it was an important market, the focus was there. But I was also working in a flat market. It's not economically, it's technically in recession a lot of times, or for a long period of time. Adidas was not doing so well at that point in time. I had to then manage expectations, but I also had to give hope for headquarters to invest in Japan, resources, financially, infrastructure, you name it, to allow us to grow. And we have grown immensely since then. We're over. I can't really talk about how much we were, but we're well in it. We're in excess of €1 billion business here, which is quite a big company to be in charge of. And I was really proud of what the team did. And I just again thought it was time for me to maybe try something different.
So you've got probably, I'm guessing, in your direct leadership group, probably a number of foreigners. I know, Thomas and Marcus, etc. You've probably got Japanese. I guess it must be quite a mix there. When you get here, you've got to start leading through people. So how did you approach getting to know people and deal with this diversity within the workforce? Particularly, probably most of the workforce is Japanese, but at that sort of reporting level, there's bound to be more than just Japanese, I suppose.
Yeah, when I first arrived, I actually knew the team. Korea is not far away, and we quite often meet throughout the year. The entire world of Adidas meets. So I knew the guys, some of them personally, and my transition from Korea to here wasn't, it was more that, as I mentioned before, the scale. But the leadership side, it wasn't that hard. I think we had a great bunch of people here, but then we had to start adding structure, and there were several positions that were vacant at the time. And then it was a matter of listening to the current team, finding out where the issues were, what they wanted to do, what the challenges were, and then facilitating the solutions, or creating and facilitating the solutions for those problems that enabled us to fill those roles, and then to work out a strategy on where we want to go in the future. And then, of course, you can't make your own strategy. You've got to fit it into a global strategy, and that's where we went.
Often, when you have a new boss turn up in any organisation, everyone's a little bit on tenterhooks. What's the new guy like? What are we going to do here? How much can I tell this guy? How much can I trust him or her? Doesn't matter. How did you find the reaction maybe on the people you didn't know through the sort of global Adidas meetings who were locals, but again, you're the new guy through the door, here we go again. How did you find mixing it in with that group and building the trust?
Well, the trust part is important, but I think I was told by several of the senior people that at least I was coming here with a reputation, and there was kind of an expectation that we could repeat the success in Korea, and which puts the pressure on, by the way, so there was people wanted someone. They wanted someone they could trust. They were lucky enough that they had someone they already knew of or knew personally. Same with myself. I had people I knew of and knew personally here, and the rest of the team. Once over a given period of time, you walk the walk, or you walk the talk, I should say. You gain their trust, and in Japan, I think that's one of the fundamental. I don't even know if it's Japan. It's anywhere in the world. If they trust your leader, they'll follow you, and not just do what you say. And then that's when you start getting buy-in, and you start sharing ideas, working together cross-functionally, and it goes from there.
So you've got people here who've been doing their jobs quite comfortably under a previous leadership. You turn up, new boss, new leader. They're still doing their jobs. How do you rate them in terms of engagement? Because in a lot of cases, the surveys that I've ever seen in multinational organisations in Japan, the engagement score is usually pretty low, and headquarters always wonders why they're so low. There's always a lot of pressure to get those scores up. How was it with the team when you arrived? Were they already very, very high levels in terms of their scoring or engagement, so you didn't have much to do? Or was it sort of quite typical that we see around numbers in Japan and you felt some pressure to get those numbers up?
Well, I've got to say that those programs, those employee engagement programs, for me, and Adidas do them periodically, religiously, and they focus on these worldwide. But they also understand that it's all relative. Now, if comparing Japan to another country is not what they're looking for. They're looking for a trend, and they're looking for a pattern. And what's more important is the feedback you get from those. I did go through a period where, and as you said, it was one of the lower ones in the world. But people couldn't understand what that meant. Low is what? Now, when you talk to a lot of people, 5 out of 10 was good. They thought, what's wrong with that? And that conversation, I totally agreed with them. And then it got to a point, though, where our CEO was saying, and I suggested one day that we should explain more about the scoring system if you want to have some more relativity across countries. And he was all for that, but there was many people who know these surveys who say, no, you're not supposed to. But he was the CEO, and he said, I want you to. So I stood up in front of everybody and I said, listen, this is relatively speaking what a 1, a 2, a 3, up to 10 is all about. And when you score a 9 and 10, that's a positive. If you score 6 and below, it's a negative. The stuff in the middle doesn't count. Doesn't count to the score at all. And once we got that, and I explained that, for example, if there was someone scoring us a 0 or a 1 or a 2 or a 3, I said, to be honest, you shouldn't even work here. I don't want you to come to an office where you're rating it that badly. And it was a minor number of people. But I was very open and said, guys, if you're not going to be part of the solution and fix this, then you really should consider. And what we set up, a little bit controversial, was with 3 recruiting companies, an anonymous application process where anyone could apply for external roles because they were unhappy with the particular scoring that they were giving. And it was controversial, except Germany thought it was amazing. They thought, why not? That's great.
Where did that idea come from?
My frustration.
So you generated that idea?
That was particularly, anything controversial is normally me. I will take credit for this one because I was very frustrated that people would work for a team, and it's not good for the rest of the people when you have somebody who has that mentality. Now, people who are scoring 5s and 6s, that might be their true score, or it might, relatively speaking, as we found out, be a good. And then we said, well, you know what? The rest of the world thinks a good is somewhere around a 7, okay? And we gave a mental thought to each score, and the score went through the roof. Then it allowed us, and we didn't take credit for an increase in the score. What we did was we said, okay, guys, now we know where we are, relatively speaking. Let's work on this. And we had times when it went up, and we had times when it went down. And it coincided with big decisions within restructures, for example, always negatively impact. Headcount freezes negatively impact. Bonus time positively impacts. So that's what we did. So for me, again, comparing across countries is, I think, not a good thing to do. And if you do want to score me, then score me against the sports industry in Japan. I think someone once told me that the only 2 industries in Japan that is positive is alcohol, tobacco, and I can't remember the second, but there is 2 that are through the roof. Now, I don't know why, but as you said, it's common here to be at that level, but if that's the way it is, then that's the way it is.
How would you, personally, having led teams in Australia, led teams in Indonesia, led teams in Korea, South Korea, forget about the scoring, just your own feeling about the level of engagement of the Japanese team relative to those other countries, your own experience?
Very positive in the beginning until we had the structure set. There's always negative feedback because people don't often talk too much about the good stuff, and when those negative topics come up, and they are, let's just say they're not huge, it's actually a good thing because people are looking for something to complain about, and if they're digging deep trying to find something, you're doing pretty well. And the hot topics, they're very obvious: working hours, the pressure, overtime, and complications in authorization matrices, which across matrix company that we work in has, and it's just a fact of life. But to simplify that was the challenge, and that's what they were asking for. Those are the big ticket items that we were trying to work on. For me, is the turnover rate high? If it is, then we have a problem in the company. If it's too low as well, it's not a good thing. You need a good, healthy turnover of staff. In our retail, we took that from something that was very high in the 40% or something down to in the 20s, which in retail is very good because we want to retain the people that we're training. But it's a very transient kind of industry, retail itself. So again, I took that turnover rate separate to the office so that I could take them on their own merits and understand if there was a problem, what was causing that problem. And in retail, for example, it was a lack of career development and where do they go from here? And our retail team and HR put together a fantastic process, which started in Korea actually, that would bring someone from the shop floor up to shop manager, to regional manager, into the back office, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how we improve that engagement. I think here in Japan, they were in the end as engaged, if not more, than any other country that I've worked in. And again, I only speak for Adidas, and I know other people, other leaders may see a different opinion. But for our company, people want to work for Adidas, especially World Cup, the Olympics coming up. There's a national pride in the national team, which we have and sponsor. People love that. They love to wear the jersey on a match day. So it's there's many more indicators than just a survey, but it's definitely part of what we do look at and take very seriously.
Yeah, I was going to say that the concept of pride in the organisation is very key in motivation. And as you say, in a sporting industry where you can associate with national teams, with particular sporting events, even if it's not a particular related product, it's still sports in general, it's still national pride in general. That's a type of additional motivating opportunity, I imagine, which a lot of companies will never have because it's it's just not related to what they're doing. So, did you look at ways to enhance that further, to drive that harder?
Yes, I mean, any creating competitions not competition, but competitions within the company allowed us to offer prizes, and those prizes are tickets to the Olympics. And we'd fly people over to Brazil or London or China. We would offer. We were even offering job training at football clubs, just to get that experience out of the office and with our assets. Individuals would get to meet their idols, a Kagawa, captain of the team or ex-captain, and we always, every meeting that we had, every all-employee meeting, we brought surprise guests into the building to talk, to answer questions, if they could do some social media with people. We quite often, had David Beckham was always a great one he's fantastic to mingle with the staff. He would always come in and sit on our rooftop and talk to the staff. He played football once in Korea when I was working in Korea for us with little kids, and amazing with kids. So we had that opportunity, which is fantastic. When Kei Nishikori was an Adidas guy, he would always drop in. So and in the company we offer sporting programs, and we subsidise the fees that they have to pay to be in part of the runners club or the tennis club or the mountain hiking club or whatever it could be. So it just let us do so much with the team and offer so much. I mean, for me, it's one of the little benefits of working with the company. But in recent years, I think Adidas got very, very good at rotating staff. So we have some senior people working in other countries around Asia, in Germany, even to the point where they don't want to come back because they're really enjoying their senior leadership roles they play within the group.
These are Japanese staff.
That's right.
Very rare.
Yeah. So
how did you guys do that? Because most companies don't do that.
And I used to think that my job, and this was way back, that my job was to find a leader to replace me from that country, and then I changed. I changed and said, we're an international company. People are going to be rotating all over the world all the time. What would be better is if we have more of let's say in Japan, more Japanese working overseas, and that was our aim, to rotate. So globally, we have a global hyperpotential program. We have a local hypertension program, potential program, and we would develop those people. They would travel the world. They would work together in groups, and then they would become part of succession plans that were not just for Japan but for the world. So my head of sales here many years ago, a Japanese lady, she set up the e-commerce business for me, and we were a $2 million business in 2010, and we're beyond 150 million euro now. And she took that to 100 million within 4 years, and she had a great life in that period of time because things were on fire. Then I asked her, could she do something with my wholesale side of the business? Now that was controversial because having a lady, a woman running such a senior position in our industry, there was a lot of pushback from accounts, customers, owners of companies, and then she proved herself. I won't go into the details on camera about what was said, but she had to prove herself, and she did. And she became the general manager for Chile. And now she's one of the head of sales of Apple here in Japan. So, we I replaced her with another lady from China, which was even more controversial because I was now getting a Chinese citizen to run a Japanese subsidiary, of Adidas. And again, she's taking it up to another level. She's a star, absolute star. And you need to do that.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Yeah, that is what you're talking about there is for Japan amazing. I mean, the fact that you could get Japanese leaders to leave Japan and go overseas for a start, because often they've got families here, they've got kids in school, they prefer Japan, the language barrier. I mean, there's a lot of things here which make Japan a more preferable location for them than elsewhere. To get them to do that is phenomenal. To get a woman in a macho Latino culture like Chile to be the leader, phenomenal. Even in, as you say, in Japan, that's even amazing too. So you've really broken through some big barriers there. It's congratulations to you for doing that.
And Greg, you mentioned before about my executive team. When it comes to nationalities, our diversity inclusion policy is not just about gender, it's about passports, it's about age, because you have that mix in a boardroom and it really helps the business. And I can, hand on heart, say it worked. We have a mix of nationalities. I think what I really wanted to do over the last, not out of 10 years, but probably after a few years I was here, I realised that this might not be a fantastic analogy, but trying to chop a tree down from the top, it takes a long time. If you wedge in things all the way up the tree will fall the way you want it to fall. And so we have non-Japanese citizens placed all over the business at different levels, not expatriates, brought in as either local hires or local plus, and it has, I think, really moved the needle within the company to opening its eyes to the possibilities of working overseas. I mean, I can't prove it, but this could be part of the reason why now we have so many Japanese Adidas employees now working either in China or they're working in Boston for Reebok, in Portland for Adidas. We have, off the top of my head, I know 3 senior people working in Germany, head office. And I've asked them to come back and work for me back in the day, and they don't want to. They really enjoy, and their families have really enjoyed living in Germany and working and going to school and the lifestyle that was offered in Germany. So, I think, some of that thing, that perception of leaving Japan, once you get out, it opens up a whole new world. We also started a program where you didn't have to go overseas for 2 or 3 years. We did a program where you go for 3 months. It gives you a taste, a flavour, and we would try and rotate people in Asia, and gave them a taste of what it could be like, and then if down the track they decided they would like to, on a more permanent basis, work overseas, they could apply for jobs, and that seemed to work.
And you've got Japanese working alongside imports, I'll call them imports, be they local hire imports or local plus, but they're still imports, so they're dealing in an international environment at the section level, and so that's really, I guess, for the Japanese, forcing an internationalization level upon them, which possibly normally in most companies they'd never get much contact with. So did you find that was really starting to trigger a different way of thinking, a different way of moving amongst the team, the Japanese team particularly?
Yeah, look, I mean, there was negative comments as well. I mean, we have comments and feedback that says it takes twice as long to do meetings because everything has to be translated. We have a fleet of full-time translators within the company, but that's an investment, I see. We spend a lot of money on offering English courses, and I start work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I would religiously see several guys for years coming in before I was there, in a room, online, or with a teacher, learning English, knowing that they want to go somewhere within Adidas, either Japan or Adidas, the group worldwide. And like I said, there's always going to be a negative component, but I mean, when they, the result of this could be that now people are wanting to travel more and to get out of their comfort zone and try out a different country. It could be part of that helped change their mind. I don't know.
Innovation is always, one of the issues in Japan, because it tends to be everyone in their comfort zone, as you mentioned, doing the same things in the same way and getting the same results, and quite comfortable with that because they're competent and confident in their current role. They don't make mistakes. This is a no-mistake culture. So the best way to make no mistakes is do nothing new or challenging or different, because that's where there's going to be problems. So how do you get around that mentality here of, play within the lines, don't put your head above the parapet, keep a low profile, don't volunteer, don't take on anything risky, protect your reputation, black mark in the HR, book if you made a mistake. How do you get around those sorts of issues to get people to step up and come up with ideas as one level? The other part of that question I want to ask you is, how do you get your ideas, related question, down to the people at the bottom? Because you're operating in a big organisation, you're at the top, you've got your direct reports, you've got middle management. How do you know that the things you want are actually happening at the bottom? So we'll do a two-part question. So first part, let's talk about the innovation, and let's talk about how do you drive change down to the bottom. So did you find the innovation component within the company?
Change was probably the toughest topic for me or my experience in Japan.
Because?
Just the unwillingness to change, as you said. It works. If I keep doing it, I won't get into any trouble. And it's I don't know if it's a mentality of it's easy. It's not that. It's why change it? There's no need to. And if you don't know an alternative, then it's a nil topic. And then when you have new leadership, and then I changed my leadership team over the time, people start asking questions and developing new ideas. And as you said, though, a lot of people don't want to be that rusty nail to put their head up. So we started off a long time ago with the innovation box, the ideas box. Then there would be put your name on it or don't put your name on it. Then we'd offer prizes. And the prizes do work. When you're saying, the best idea will, get a bonus or additional bonus, or maybe go to the Olympics or do something, it helps. But then we did get feedback that when that person had an idea, somehow that person became responsible for implementing that particular idea. And not always is that idea about your department. And over time, we actually created a department that reported directly to me, and that was business development. And that business development department, it actually exists. It was being rolled out across the world. Our CSO in Germany, he loved this particular setup. And once I did it, I can't believe I survived without it. And these people, this group, report to me, and they look after all project management. They look after strategy. They look after marketplace intel. They run all my meetings. They coordinate a project. So what happened then was any big project was classified as strategic, mid-term, maybe long-term, something like that. Anything that was strategic would then be handed to this business development team. They would then drive that cross-functionally across the business. And so you now have the responsibility is spread. It's now very close to me, so I have direct access to that. Kind of answers your second question. And that, I've got to say, is if I work at any other company, that's the first thing I'll do, is make sure I've got some type of business development. They're not going out looking for business outside. If I had an idea, they could investigate it, then pass it to sales. That would happen. They'd incubate it, and then they would hand it over.
Not invented here is a global phenomenon, you know, of having some bright spark in a section come up with a very good idea, but that section going, we didn't think of it, so therefore it's not a good idea. And in fact, it's a bit embarrassing that we didn't think about it, so we're going to kill it because we don't like the embarrassment. So how did you get around that problem of having a business development team coming up with ideas or harvesting ideas or incorporating ideas and then getting the sections to actually deliver on it?
That's a good point. To be honest, the not invented here syndrome, I found in my time, was more from Germany, not necessarily from Japan. And the issue, or the interesting thing, is that if it comes to product, Japan is somewhere between 3 and 5 years ahead in its innovation. And in Japan, we're lucky enough to have our own creation team. We've always had it. And we design, develop, or they design and develop product for Japan, in Japan, for Japanese. Now, it's very edgy, it has different technical fabrics, and sometimes back in the day, we would get in trouble for developing these products because it would not be in line with what Germany creation was thinking about, or Portland creation was thinking about. They would then, come to Japan, tell us to stop doing it, and then load up their suitcases with samples and go back because they love wearing it themselves because it's very unique. And one of the funniest stories was that Adidas Japan launched Adidas denim jeans once, and they were caned for it, and they were quickly taken off the market after 1 or 2 seasons, let's say. 2 years later, Global launched it, and I said to my boss, why did you give us such a hard time? And I know his answer is going to be because it wasn't the right time back then. Now is the right time, okay? And I think he says it with a bit of tongue-in-cheek. So there was a lot of that. Then we were told quite often to what to do, and the Japanese team came to me and said, why are they always telling us what to do when we're number 1 in Japan and Nike's number 2? And when it's the other way around in those countries, the countries that are telling us what to do. And I said, it's a fair question. But then there's sometimes when, again, they'll keep on doing what they're doing, and all of a sudden when things, you have to react. And when things turned south or sour, the reaction of the team here in Japan, they kept doing the same thing. And my motto always was, and I must say it 100 times a year at a meeting, is that, for me, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. Okay. And when I came here, 2010 to 15, our strategic business plan was called Changing the Game. And then the global one from 16 to 20 is Creating the New, which was a great lead on from Changing the Game. And it was everything we had to convince everyone that you need to change. Now, we went through some tough times, okay? And when they were complaining about things that we had to do or drop or what, I said, well, guys, we're actually not performing right now in that particular area. Why do you want to keep doing the same thing? Okay, and that you had to show that it's tough when you're doing something that they want you to stop, but it's successful. Denim jeans, for example, and it's frustrating when it comes back 2 years later, and it's made in Germany. But more often than not, it's the other way. Is that the reaction time in Japan was never so quick. And the change part, it was a dirty word, change. And that we had to be on top of that all the time. And that business development department was always a great tool for me to get ideas out of my head and out of the executive team's head onto paper, into the business, and then quick feedback.
So, we talked before about, at the top level, you're on the, steering wheel here, strategic direction, driving the business. You're hoping that things are permeating all the way down to the bottom. So how do you know that the people at the bottom fully understand the direction of the company, the vision, mission, values, that type of directional thing? And also, how do they know what you think about the fact that they were told to stop making jeans, which was actually a good idea, and 2 years later it was proven to be a good idea, and still maintain their enthusiasm for innovation, and keep going in spite of that? So how do you get that down to the bottom level? Because your scale, as you saw about before, means your direct reports are controlling big chunks of the business, and below them, middle management controlling big chunks of the business. Only so many hours in the day, you've got headquarters, you've got global, you've got a lot of things going on in your life. How do you make sure you've got a pulse and the people at the bottom have that sort of feeling that, hey, Paul understands what I'm doing is important. He's explained to me why our denim innovation didn't go forward, but now it's come back, and da-da. How do you do that?
I would say that we have quarterly all-employee meetings, and it's compulsory that you have to attend, even to the point where sometimes I go walking the floor to see who's not at the meetings. And because people would complain about stuff in surveys that was discussed in these, that they weren't informed, okay? So then, number one, that's a great forum to we do 2-3 hours once a quarter, and we explain to people. Now I have to be careful in that I can't be, if the board's made a decision, I need to support what the board have said. Now, okay, jeans is not a board decision. That's a different level. So I could talk about that. And tongue-in-cheek, I would bring that up, okay? But, so that's my forum to make sure that I can communicate anything I need to communicate. We get actually a lot of the team to come up and present also, not just not just me for 2 or 3 hours. And then in the surveys, we in the engagement surveys, that changes. There's core questions, then there's this floating 2 or 3 questions, and it is, do you know the mission, vision of the company? Do you know our strategic blah, blah, blah? And then we get people to score. And then if we see you're always going to have people that say no or mark low. But if you see a big swing, then you know there's a big problem. That's just a couple of the tools. My door's always open. I used to meet every...
Do people
anyone
come through the door?
They do, yeah. Not as often as I thought that would happen. We did a mentoring program, and I went through the course to be a mentor, and then, of course, not many people selected me to be their mentor because they're all scared. I don't know why. But then when we did, it was great. It was good fun. And I'm hoping that the communication we had with each other, they went and told other people. And I got to say, I learnt so much. The whole drinking after work thing. I did it at the beginning, but not such a big thing. I think anymore these days. There's other ways to achieve that. I'm not against it, but I got to say, doing that 5 days a week when you've got 500 people, you're never going to cover every base. I used to have a lunch every 3 weeks with newcomers, and so every newcomer we had a pizza lunch, and we'd always have between 10 and 20 in a room, and it was there. There was 5 questions. We'd ask those questions, and they would answer, and it was for them to get to know each other also, because they're all from different departments. And then they had to ask me the same 5 questions, and then I had to be honest about my response too. So, yeah.
So that's a big trust builder, isn't it? Because you are bringing them in, they're new, they're meeting you, they're having some personal touch with you, they're being asked something, you've got to answer the same question. So that's a very even, way of doing things, very fair, I would say, way of doing things, which people probably, if they're Japanese, would never imagine that they'd be having pizza lunch with the president for a start, let alone having him answer the same questions they've had to answer. That's quite, I am sure, for Japanese, quite, wow, this is such a different company.
I'll tell you, I learned in recent years, it's something I've done all my life, but I learned in the recent years that it made a difference, and it was unbeknownst to me, in that just my personality, that I share a lot of personal stuff. I open up, maybe an all-employee meeting with a photo of my wife and my son, and some silly photo with the dog, and maybe a story about the dog. And then everyone in the company starts asking me about the dog. In the elevator, how's the dog today? Et cetera, et cetera. And I realised that sharing a lot of personal stuff really helps to break down, or the engagement between me and whoever I've been talking to.
How did
you become
learn
more
that?
vulnerable.
How did you learn
I
that?
didn't know. I got told.
Oh, you got told.
I got told, so I was doing
you
it.
should do that.
No, I was told, and I'd already been doing it all my life because it's just me.
Oh, okay.
And then I got told it's really I can't remember the exact words they used, but they really appreciated the fact that I was opening up, and it was a big deal that I was sharing such personal information with everybody, which I kind of thought was normal. But I spend more time with them than I do with my family, you know. So I want everybody to know each other, it was an interesting revelation, say, in the last 5 years. But the other 15, or the rest of my working career, I did it anyway, and I probably do it more, and I'm more conscious of myself doing it now because I know it works.
I grew up in an era in Australia where bosses were sort of above the clouds, and you could never imagine having a personal relationship with your bosses because they were scary individuals, and company businesses here, private business over here, you don't mix the two. It was all very segregated, and so coming up through that philosophy, the concept of sharing personal information, family information. I'm wondering, for perhaps a lot of people taking in this program, that's something that may not have occurred to them. They may be actually, like I was, and probably still am, if I'm honest, about sharing personal stuff. And there may be something in Japan where there's an appetite to have that little bit of personal touch with the boss, and have a, you're not this sort of granite rock, impenetrable individual. You're an actual human being, and you have family, and you have dogs, and you have issues too, and they can relate to you more. So maybe it's an encouragement to a lot of people taking this program in to think about how they can make themselves, not saying necessarily vulnerable, inverted commas, but often as the boss, you think you've got to be this invulnerable super person, but maybe you don't. And maybe what you're telling us is that actually that's possibly true. You don't have to be like that.
That's right. I mean, it's funny. Elevator talk is a great spot, and you just quickly say hello to someone. Then, especially on a Monday, quite often they'll say, Paul-san, so what did you do on the weekend? And I don't know what they're expecting, but I love gardening, and I love to do things around my house. I'm a bit of a renovator and created that way. And the reaction that I would be daring to do gardening or playing with my dog, down at the river or at the park, at Yogi Park, it's surprising to me that they're looking at me that way. It's like, I never expected that from you, but what else? What else? We are all in the same boat. It's just that my title, and I'm a lot older, and I went through a different path, and I got to where I am, and you do it too one day. You shouldn't stop whatever you're doing on this weekend in 10 years when you're, if you're the CEO of Adidas or any other company. What you do, what you enjoy, you do.
Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. So I've asked you a number of questions about leadership, Paul. There's anything I haven't thought to ask you that I should have asked you?
No. I think I just want to reinforce that I don't think that Japan is so different and so much more. It's got its own flavours, but it's just a beautiful country. And one of the things that we all love about Japan, right? The serenity, the calmness, and it's a safe environment, etc. and we love doing business here. Sometimes in the office, the things you want to take away would also impact. If you could just magically take some of those things away, it would change Japan. And I just think you need to, the stuff that we love. And I just think that we need to be careful what we wish for and manage our business with, with the environment we have. And you can use it to your advantage. You can use it to your. I mean, like I said, you get trust in Japan, and loyalty is amazing. A lot, probably better than a lot of other countries that I've worked in. So get that trust, and you'll get things done.
So if you had to give say 3 pieces of advice, or roughly 3 pieces of advice to someone's about to take up an assignment in Japan, or they've arrived on their new assignment and they don't know Japan. You've been here 10 years, you're a veteran of Japan. What would be a couple of pieces of advice you'd give to a newbie, someone who's just starting out?
This is the one I had to think of because it's been a long time since I started in Japan. But the one thing, number one would be, don't be brainwashed by some of the things you're told when you first arrive in Japan. Okay, you can't do this in Japan, or you can't do that in Japan, or in Japan you should do it this way. One of the, I mean, it's not a nice topic to bring up, but one of the very first things you get told in Japan is you can't fire somebody. Now, I mean, that's just ridiculous. Of course you can. You just got to do it in the right way, okay? And you have to have good reason, and so you should. So don't be brainwashed by other foreigners who are either new to the country and have heard this, or have been here a long time and really believe in it. I just don't think it's a good way to start your mindset when you come into the country. You could end up heading down the wrong path. As I've mentioned many times, there is as many challenges in Japan as in any other country. Okay, don't focus on all of those bad things because the bucket of good things is quite big, and it makes living and working in Japan and raising a family in Japan and building your career in Japan a wonderful thing. Say lastly, there's always growth opportunities in Japan. It is a flat market, yes, in general, but you've got to pick your battles, you've got to pick the areas, and that's where innovation comes in also. You need to think, you need to ask help, and consultants can often give you an insight into the market from a bigger picture and help you develop those plans. And look at where you can head in this country to grow your business and grow your career and grow your family.
Well, this has been a fascinating journey. We've gone here from Indonesia to South Korea to Japan, and the scale of business going, 2.5 times, I think you said, the scale of
It was back in 2010. Now it's
even more.
It's even more. Yeah.
Even more, and a huge population of people working in the company. So adjusting that scale, and also messaging, the humanity aspect you mentioned about opening up yourself to the team and having that rapport. These are very, very, very interesting insights. So I really like to thank Paul for sharing those with us. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Greg, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for joining us. This has been another episode of Japan's top business interviews with the recently, ex-CEO of Adidas Japan, Paul Hardisty. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on our next program.